Hey guys, it's your boy, Ballface8020, back again with another great commentary. So, for this video, first part of the video is going to be the health stuff. Second part of the video, I'm going to talk about um, the safety issues in American cities. So that'll be towards the middle end. So if you're interested in that, just go to that now. And then I'll say just a few more words about Charlie Kirk after that. So anyway, if you guys are familiar with my stuff, you know that I've done a lot of different diets and exercise programs over the course of my life. But if anything that I've done in the last, decade or so has been mainly to deal with, the depression and the fatigue, particularly the fatigue. So yeah, I've tried, a lot of different diets. And, I've also mentioned before that, when it comes to just the depression part, the depressed mood, eating healthy, a healthy diet takes the edge off, but it doesn't cure it. My mood was fine before this most recent diet anyway. I mean, maybe it could have been better. But well, okay. So anyway, the thing, but I've tried many before. I've done it. I've had some success. It's always made me feel better and lose weight. And then I think you can probably even tell that I look healthier. Because I'm not as inflamed and my complexion is better. For me though, it's more than like when most people eat healthy, they're not going to get like as immediate a visual reaction or as immediate change in like healthiness of appearance, because for me, I really am allergic to wheat. And so simply cutting out wheat from my diet is going to have a pretty dramatic impact on my complexion. And then I probably am more sensitive than most people to like all the negative effects of sweeteners and stuff like that. Again, if you're familiar with me, I've also talked a lot about fasting. So it was when I got back from vacation, like, I had been talking about how to help with, mood, and I'm not really even sure why I started doing it, but one thing that I did get out of reading more was my chronic boredom wasn't as bad. The sleep was a little bit better. So, I'd been reading, and it improved me enough that I started thinking about other things I could do. Like, first thing that comes to mind is diet. And, but I knew that I was like, well, I'm not going to be dieting on vacation, so just forget it. So I was just like, all right, well, I'll think about it when I get back. So when I got back from vacation, shortly thereafter, I started dieting. And, I know from experience that I can't keep these diets for any longer than 3 weeks. At around like the 2 or 3 week mark, the cravings for junk food become so overwhelming that I just can't do it. So this time though, what I was more thinking about was like going back to the whole fasting stuff. Like, I've tried many fasts. Longest I've ever made is around 80 hours. But, then I thought about it and I was like, well, you think about people who've historically fasted, like if anytime you're reading about fasting in ancient or even medieval times, these were all people who were on what are, by the standards of today, healthy diets. Like everything was, they weren't eating a lot of sweeteners because it just wasn't available to them, or refined grains and stuff. So like these people were in a kind of like a health, like especially a metabolic health greater than we have today. So if like when you read about stuff in the Bible of somebody just going on a 40-day fast, it's easier for them than it is for people today, who've got all these like, food addictions going in and are in worse shape and are probably chronically dehydrated. I know that I certainly was or am. And So yeah, I was thinking, I've had so many failed fasts, but I've never tried fasting before. Like, I've never tried pre-fasting, like actually getting myself into a state where, I was going into the fast, with with I don't even know how to describe it, but just going into the fast in a state where my body and to a lesser extent my mind, was in a place for, a fast for, for any fast at all, let alone an extended fast. Now, I know that there are people out there with Western diets and unhealthy lifestyles who are able to go right into a fast and be successful. I'm not saying it can't work, but I'm saying that, when I've done it, what eventually, gets me at, no matter of which point it gets me at, is, the willpower, like the willpower and the desire to eat just becomes like overwhelming. So if that's the problem, maybe there's an easier way to do it for my body that it's not, that I don't need as much willpower. And so that was really why I did it. That's really why I switched to eating healthy and or like at least, a short-term healthy diet. And when I say healthy, it's not ultra healthy. I'm not worried about like, eating organic or, locally sourced stuff like that. It just means no sweeteners, no refined grains, and then in my case, no gluten. There's nothing wrong with gluten, but I have a gluten sensitivity. That's it. I don't like, there's no time restrictions. There's no thing for how much I can eat. There's, it's just avoiding the bad stuff. And so again, I want to stress that the idea was I went into it with the idea that I'm going to be able to last 3 weeks at most. My goal is at some time in that 3 weeks to go on an actual fast and to see how long I can make it, to see if it's going to be easier or possible to go further. Again, if the furthest I've ever made it is a little over 3 days, maybe, I can make it 5 days this time. As for the reasons I want to do an extended fast, I've talked about all that before. Probably not worth rehashing it here right now. Maybe I will a little bit later in the video, but for now we'll skip that. So anyway, I went on the, this healthy diet, I just call it clean eating. So I started clean eating, and I guess that my first day would have been Monday of last week. So we're about like the week and a half mark. Yeah, it's annoying, because you have to do some cooking food and preparation, and then it's not like, not only or do I like junk foods, but they're much more convenient. It's when you have to like do food prep. So the way I get around it is basically, I go to Chinese restaurants and buy rice because I don't feel like making it myself. I don't even eat that much rice anyway. I'll get a rotisserie chicken, and then over the course of a few days, I'll eat that. So between that, broccoli, baby carrots, beans, I try to do stuff that just doesn't require a lot of prep because the motivation isn't there. I don't really like cooking, and I don't like cleaning up, so it's mainly just to be able to have like convenient foods that are acceptable. The only like cheating I'll do is, again, if I'm not able to find like a healthy food in time, I'll get what do you call like beef jerky, because that obviously, beef jerky from the store, it's going to have some sweeteners on it, fair amount, but doesn't seem to have that much of an impact, so I'll eat that. Yeah, and then pretty quickly, I started to feel noticeably better, because normally I'm like really tight, have a lot of aches and pains, and those have really cleared up. I always feel better about that. Mood is better, concentration is better. It wasn't like they were horrible before though. And I have had some bad days on that front. The problem, you know, is like, yeah, I do feel noticeably better, but I still have like sleep and fatigue problems, even if they're not as bad. And it's like, you know, especially the longer I go, the more, you know, this feeling better becomes my new baseline. And I forget like how shitty I felt before. So, and, you know, similarly as to like when I go on these diets, I start feeling noticeably better, usually within 2 days. And then like there'll be some withdrawal type symptoms for a while, but then, you know, I'll feel better. But when I go back to eating like crap, I don't really start to feel worse right away. Like it may be a little bit worse, but it happens so gradually that you don't really notice it. That's, you know, why it can be hard to keep with these things, or one of the reasons it's hard to keep with these things. If I just felt like really good and then immediately felt like shit every time that I ate a candy bar, then it would be easier. But it's not really the case here, you know. So, and then even if I did, like honestly, the feeling when you've been away from it for a while, the feeling is so good when you come back to the junk food that you're like, dude, I don't care how bad it makes me feel. Like it's worth it. Um. So again, the goal for all this was to set me up for a fast. And, you know, I was just like, I wasn't going to push it at first. I was like, okay, well, let's just worry about the healthy eating for a while because I'm already going to be having food cravings anyway. So no need to add hunger to it. You know, just, you know, do everything. Like I'm just going to eat it like clean until like I feel like my body's gotten over the withdrawal, until I feel like my body's adjusted. And then today, I really felt like, yeah, okay, I have adjusted, so I can try it. So today, like I wasn't planning on it, but today I just wasn't hungry when I woke up. So I was like, let's just, you know, I'm going to skip the eating. I'm going to see how long I can do this. And I can tell you that, like, when you're eating clean, or when I'm eating clean, the getting into a fast is trivially easy. You know, usually, not always, depends on how I feel. Like when I start a fast, you know, it can be hard to build up momentum, like especially that first 12 to 20 hours. A lot of times I don't even make it to 12 hours. You know, it's just like there are like, because there's not just hunger, there's food cravings. And, you know, and you got blood sugar going crazy. Now the blood sugar is a little bit more stable. And the food cravings, well, I dealt with most of them last week. You know, I got them mostly like the first food craving. They're going to come back if history is any guide. But for right now, they're under control. So here we are at like around the 20-hour mark, I think. And yeah, it's been no problem. No problem whatsoever to get it. Just, you know, like I was like, yeah, I'm a little hungry. But I mean, it's not like, you know, it's fine. So that's it. So the one thing that like you see right away with it, and I knew this going in, is that getting into the fast is no problem. That first day, no problem. And then so you can try as many times as you want. Whereas I've had a lot of fasts, like, you know, things where I'm just like, you know, like I'll be so done, like my reserves are done so much after a fast that I'm not able to even try again for a while. And I'm not saying that won't happen this time, but getting into it, it's made it a lot easier. The question is going to be like day 2 and 3. Is this going to be easier than my 2 and 3 day fast? You know, I mean, days 2 and 3 of my previous fast when I was eating junk food. It's hard to believe that of all these fasts, I've never tried it this way before. You think it would be at least worth a shot, right? And so I don't know. We'll just have to see on that front. You know, one thing that, you know, I was also thinking about was like trying to start exercising and stuff. I did have one day, Sunday, I was able to take a pretty long walk and do some weightlifting. But since then, now I just don't have the energy. You know, I had more than I did, but I'm just not well enough to do like I could if I forced myself, but I'm just too tired. I'm just too tired. And you know, I would imagine that if that was going to change, it would be like months down the road. Like I would have to eat clean for months and lose like a lot of weight. I don't know how much weight I've lost so far. Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. I'm not super optimistic. But we'll see. But that gets back into like, you know, why I want to do the fasting. I know I've talked about this before. The main thing is more of like a spiritual, mental thing. Like I'm really interested in exploring alternate states of consciousness, but I can't use mushrooms because they don't work for me because of my fucking SSRIs. So that leaves only salvia and DMT. But where the hell am I supposed to get that shit? Plus, if you read about it, even people who like, if you like the shamans who used it, I know DMT is kind of its own story, but especially with something like salvia, like they prepped, like these people had healthier lifestyles, spiritual lifestyles, and they prepped for a long time before it. You know, so they went in, you know, really like, you know, it's not some magic pill that you can just take. And you know, I've talked about lucid dreaming and stuff before. So I just feel like if I could do a long-term fast, a real long-term 40-day fast, that is it going to help with anything? Maybe not. I don't know. But I feel like it at least opens the doors to like trying to explore other states of consciousness. And maybe, yeah, maybe 40 days was enough of a detox that I would get some relief for this fatigue stuff. The only way to know is try. So we'll just have to see about that. So anyway, American cities changing tack here, although it is topical now. I was thinking about doing like just a video like on it. I had a commenter ask about it. I don't want to do a standalone video about it because I don't think there's going to be enough to say. Commenter was just asking about like how dangerous like are American cities, you know, saying you live in Detroit. You know, what's it like? So this commenter maybe not from America. And Detroit is kind of known for it. There's other places that are worse, but Detroit is definitely, you know, a good example of urban decay. I don't actually live in Detroit. I live in a suburb that's near Detroit. So I just say Detroit. So anyway, he was asking like about how dangerous they are, and you know, what's so topical about it now is to what happened to that Ukrainian girl on the train, and the reason that, you know, I didn't make a video about that while it happened, even though it's huge news and like the right-wing anti-liberal space, is because, you know, to me, it was like as horrifying as it was like it was obviously, you know, a freak event. Like that, there is like that kind of stuff is bad stuff happens in American cities, but you usually don't see something like that. Like that was, you know, pretty, like that's pretty crazy. And, you know, I think that, you know, there was a lot of people who just have, the word is, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it, resentment. It's not resentment, but it like kind of means the same. Resentment towards blacks, you know, about it, because they feel like this shit again, like that this shit, you know, does happen. So I mean, they talk about like, you know, you're talking about so many different things. You know, you've got that angle, and then you've got people saying, well, liberals are responsible for this because they release, you know, violent criminals. Yeah, about the whole thing with like the anti-black angle, like I can only speak for myself. Like I just don't have a problem with blacks, and I get that some people do, and it's not really that they have, because I know that like you know, I'll know from being in black spaces that I don't know if most black people feel this way, but a lot of black people seem to think that most white people are anti-black. And I really don't think that's true. At least not in the way that you might. It depends what you mean. Because if you mean have resentment or whatever, resentment, I don't even know. towards blacks, yeah, there is a lot of that. I don't have it, but I mean, it really does exist. But I don't think, like, if I really do think you could ask most black, even most like white people on the right, say like, what do you like? Is your view towards black people positive or negative overall? I think they would say positive. I really do think that, and it doesn't mean that they aren't really angry about shit like this and resentful, about shit like this, which I get. I don't tell anybody how to feel. It's the thing is, it's like, I know firsthand when it's when it's um when it's one of your kind and it's a young woman. It brings it on to a whole nother level. And if it's an attractive young woman, it brings it like super to another level. And if it's an attractive young woman and you're a heterosexual male, now you're in the stratosphere. So I understand the emotions. And then just to like see it, like to have it all on tape is just fucked up. To me though, it's tough to comment on something that like is so clearly an exceptional circumstance, And then if you want to look at it from an anti-black angle, well, it's like, because, and kind of teed it up for that, right? Because the guy afterwards says, I got that white girl, like, it's just like really twist the knife for, no pun intended. Yeah, how are, of course people are going to react badly to that. But if you want to look at the whole thing, like people are saying, well, there were like black people around and they didn't help. I'm not sure I'd have jumped in because I'd have been so shocked, I'd like to think that I'd have had the courage, but me, there's no mental way for me to process this. I would be so confused and be frozen. Second of all, when somebody finally, somebody finally did come to help, it was a black guy. It was too little, and it's too bad he wasn't there at time, but he did try to help. And so again, I don't tell anybody how to feel. Like for me, like if you want to say that this is like, well, this is a problem, like this is a black problem, I just don't see it that way because they mostly don't do stuff like that. I think if you were going to talk about stuff like that, your better example would be something like the knockout game. And I don't even know how common that shit is. And then I think there's always going to be the frustration with, because race is such a third rail, like you can't, people feel like not only are they resentful about it, but that they can't even talk about it. They can't even bring it up. They can't even like bring up this. They can't even bring up they can't bring up the racial angle, but then you have what it feels like a media cover up. But for like the media, and far be it from me to defend them, it feels more like, as horrific as, I was about to try to, justify the media here, but no, it is a deliberate cover up, but they're deliberately covering up because they don't want to inflame racial tensions. Oh man, I'm gonna get flack for this. I think the media covering it, I think their hearts are in the right place on this one. Because it's so inflammatory. And then like the thing is, it's like, okay, yeah, the media doesn't talk about it, but guys, come on, everybody knows about this shit. I think it's good that it's out there, that people know about it, but I understand why the mainstream media doesn't want to like lead with this. And because there is, not that the media ever shows civic responsibility in other cases, but in this case, yeah, there is like a public interest and stuff. I don't think it should be censored, but I understand the media not showing it. And it, what other people can say, right? Because we've seen this before. What, like, if it were the reverse? A white guy stabbing a young, attractive black woman, and then it's like the media would be all over that. It's like, well, yes, that's true. However, that would also be a dog bites man story in a way that this really isn't. You know, again, not to try to say that this kind of shit happens all the time, but this shit does happen. When it comes to racism, I don't really think that any group is more racist than any other group. I think that some people are racist and some people aren't. I think that most people of any race are not particularly racist. When I say racist, I mean has antipathy towards another race, not has resentment or even feelings of superiority or ill will or distrust, because that's just life. That's just how people are. But I'm talking about, like, you know, normally socialized people who've got normal lives, like actually really either hate or at least intensely dislike other races. My guess is the percentage of people who feel that way is the same in every race, or about the same in every race. Because I know some people want to say, no, but like there's a lot more blacks who really hate white people than there are the reverse. Look, I'm open-minded. I'm not saying it's not true. I just don't think it is. The the and yeah. So, but anyway, the other thing about it is like this whole thing of like what liberals have done to our cities and stuff like that is, you know, like they've made them unsafe. Well, this is, again, I'm going to have to kind of side with the left here because now, like, this particular guy should never have been out. I mean, he should have been. These are the kind of guys who need to either be locked up for life or euthanized at like his 3rd strike, let alone his 12th strike or whatever like that. There is a problem with all this new cashless bail stuff for the actual like victims themselves, but for the most part, like, there's 2 parts to it. One is the cities are the left's turf. Yeah, like I've talked about this before. To me, they can run it however they want. And like, yeah, of course, in a case like this, it was horribly tragic. You know, I don't want to see anything like that. But for the most part, like well, I mean, okay, I'm going to be honest with you. A lot of the victims in these kind of things are white liberals who, it's like, I mean, they deserve it. You know, that wasn't the case here, but you know, it does happen a lot of the times. And and like, I actually do take some satisfaction in seeing them be on the receiving end of what they're trying to force on the rest of us. But the other thing is, there are times where I have to go to Detroit, and you know, even post COVID, post George Floyd, when things supposedly got really bad. And I'm just going to be honest with you, I just don't notice a difference from Detroit now, like, than when I went into the 90s. Like, I never got mugged or shot in the 90s, and I've never got mugged or shot then. I mean, I've had, in like particularly dangerous black neighborhoods, I had 2 younger guys back in the late 90s call me a white boy. That was it. I got called a white boy by some obviously insane drug addict downtown one time. But that's it. Nobody's ever assaulted me. Nobody's ever threatened me. Nobody's ever mugged me. Now, I've never walked around in any of the part of the city in the middle of the night. Again, I can go all the way back to the 90s. Even in downtown Detroit, which is safer. I knew of a few guys who got mugged, you know, back in like the late 90s. So it's always been dangerous at night. I understand that statistically things have gotten a lot worse, you know, post George Floyd. But this idea that like the cities are unlivable war zones, it's like, yeah, right, I wish. To me it seems the same. Like I guess, you know, the big difference is so much stuff behind locked glass, you know, that you didn't really, it wasn't like in the 90s, yeah, the cities, Detroit was always shit, but it wasn't like, it wasn't like a police state to get like you know, a bag of combos or something, you know. Like that's especially if you go into a drugstore. So like that part, yeah, okay, that part is worse. But again, that's only really an issue if you actually live in the city and are dealing. If you're just visiting it, it's really not that bad, compared to like if you're living with it every day, it probably wears on you. But if you're living with it every day, you voted for this, so you deserve it. But I mean, I just see cities as just bad things, you know. The first recorded instance of white liberals is the Tower of Babel story, because it's like they wanted to build that tower, but once the tower was done, they were going to be having gay pride parades and mass immigration and shit like that. And there's just something wrong with cities. So like when people talk about like, oh, we want to like Trump wants to put in to like get rid of crime and run our cities properly. It's like, no, I don't want them to be run properly. I want cities to be hellholes where people don't want to go, because I don't want, the wealth and power. I mean, the wealth and power is going to be concentrated in there anyway, but it's got to be limited as much as possible. That's why, like, for me, I would say, like, I don't believe in democracy anyway, but I would absolutely say, like, you'd have to make an exception for blacks and Latinos, because you couldn't be, like, targeting them based on their race. But you could say that any white person who lives in an urban area has no right to vote. If all of those, I mean, you'd be taking like 10 million liberals off the voter rolls at least. And you can maybe even extend it to metro suburbs. Like that might be a little harder. But if you were just going to talk about like adjacent suburbs, like any white person who lives in an urban area or in an area directly connected to it, if we were going to just take away their right to vote and put Section 8 housing in their neighborhoods, that would solve a lot of problems. The easiest thing would be to just get rid of democracy altogether. But yeah, so no, for me, like, look, everybody's got their own experience, so, if you're from America and have had any bad experiences in cities, let me know. For me, it's just like, yeah, it's at night, it's really dangerous. I'm not sure how much worse than it has been than it has been in the past. Detroit is statistically a very dangerous place. I have been in bad black neighborhoods in Detroit many times. Maybe many is not the right word, but several times. I've never had any problems. My sister lived in a bad black neighborhood in Detroit, and for 2 years, and she had problems with her roommates who were white. The only thing I remember is some crackhead once tried to steal some textbooks that she ordered to like resell them to buy more crack or to buy heroin or something. But no, I mean, not that I know of. I'm not saying that there aren't problems. I'm just saying as far as I know, they're like the left is right when they say that the right is overreacting and that the cities really aren't that dangerous. To me, that seems to be correct. Again, statistically, I know it's worse. So, I can see it from both sides. I can tell you, being in insurance, when we have a customer who calls and says I was in an accident, because generally what you call when there's an accident with insurance, you want there to be a police report. And like if they're calling from Detroit, like they're in like Detroit city limits and where this accident happened, and they call us, we tell them if it's in city limits of Detroit, we say exchange the information, but don't even bother calling the police, because unless somebody was hurt, the Detroit police will not show up. And it's not just something that everybody knows. Like they'll just explicitly say, we will not show up unless somebody's injured. Because their resources have just been spread so thin. That I think is new, because I didn't get into insurance until after George Floyd. But my understanding is that post George Floyd is where it came in. So anyway, Charlie, yeah, I talked about at the end of my last video, like about like the whole thing of like people on the right taking revenge, and I said like who are you going to get revenge on? And I think that's the problem we're running into. Like, now people are shocked, they're in grief, they want to hit back. there are, people on the right talking about revenge, and, I just don't think it's going to go anywhere. And because I don't think, like, who are you going to take revenge on? And then, so then you've got people saying, like, we need to talk about the dehumanizing rhetoric on the left and shit like that. Well, dude, the left has always been like that. I can tell you, like, even in the 90s when they weren't, like, as insane, they were the same way. They would be, the thing is, if like Charlie Kirk happened, like imagine instead of some milquetoast conservative had gotten killed in the 90s, the left would have been the same way they are now. Like, the leftist leadership is pretending to be upset about it. Some of them I've seen some remarks from liberals that seem genuinely upset. And they really, like, but the thing is, how upset can you be when you hated all the values the person stood for? Like, do it on the reverse. What if there was some liberal who we thought was, like, basically a good guy, but for me, it would be somebody like Obama, like who I think is a really good guy on a personal level, but I just hated his politics. But you can think of other guys too, right? There's sometimes, like, you just like them on a personal level, and you're always going to be kind of mealy-mouthed when you're condemning it, because you'd be like on one hand, you really are horrified and saddened about what happened, but on the other hand, your values haven't changed. And I feel like that's what, like, people on the right want from the left. They want them to. They were like, okay, well, you're really sorry about what happened to Charlie. Then if you're really sorry, then you're going to give up all your horrible left-wing beliefs. And it's like, well, no, they're not going to do that. I don't think that's a reasonable request, to expect, like, yeah, some of them, I'm talking about the people who are saying they're sorry. Some of them really aren't sorry. They just have to say it, and they know it. I think, and I know I've been naive in the past, there's some that I'm positive are sincere, that are really upset and really do mean their condolences. Although it doesn't mean that they hate the values that Charlie stood for any less. At least his political values. I think a lot of them do think he's a good person, was a good person on a personal level. The thing that, Charles Krauthammer said, way back, this was like during the Iraq War, a little bit before that, I think. He said that, and this is where there's a bit of a divide. The right thinks that the left is stupid. The left thinks that the right is evil. And that's, like, again, that's, I just like yeah, I mean, it's true and it's true in a broad sense. And, I know I talked about Iglesias 2 videos ago. I feel like he's like one of those, well, that's an exception to that. Like, he's one of the few liberals who really understands the right in a way that most liberals don't. I don't think he thinks the right is evil. He just really, but he understands them and disagrees with them. However, mostly, liberals, living with them, interacting with them, reading their stuff, yeah, they really do just think that the right is evil. The thing is, I've always been sympathetic with it because I don't think the left is stupid. I think they're evil. And, but I don't know if that's, like, where most the right rank and file are. So anyway, so yeah, no, but people they vent, about what happened to Charlie, talking about revenge. And then, so they want to talk, like, like influencers and stuff are saying, like, yeah, we've got to crack down on leftist hate speech. First of all, how are you even going to do that? Without, like, nationalizing huge portions of the economy. Secondly, like, yeah, look, I'm all for doxing people who say shit, who like, are saying anything celebratory about what happened, dox them, get them fired. I'm for all that. Like, let's do it. But again, I just like the rhetoric from the left. I don't know. I don't think it had been that bad. You know, I mean, and if it has been bad, it's been more towards like Trump specifically. People are calling for Trump, like Trump to get executed or whatever. And it was way worse, I thought, during Trump's first term. But there's like, it's not an issue of funding. What are you going to do? Launch investigations and defund the left? Like, you really, I mean, they don't need funding to say that shit. That's just how they are. So like this idea that like this kind of like McCarthy, like this hope for like a McCarthyism type thing, or to like I just don't see it being effective, and I just don't get the point of it. So if you're asking me like what should we do like about what happened to Charlie, it's like, well, I'm not sure we need to do anything because I think it's an exceptional circumstance. You know, you've got like the left can feel that they're losing. And like for a lot of like the left has a much higher first of all, they have a much higher propensity to violence. You know, the thing is, committed leftists are all inherently violent. I've never met an exception. I'm not talking about your rank and file libtard, who tends to be kind of supportive of leftist violence. In a case like this, they're not, usually. But your rank and file, like liberal leftist, is inherently violent. I've never met or read an exception. And so like when people are talking about all the people celebrating, yeah, it's a real phenomenon. There really is true believers. I just don't know if that's any more than like, 20% of white people on the left. But you're not going to change them. Like they're going to still spout their toxic shit, and on social media they can do that. Like, I mean, what do you want to do? Shut down Blue Sky? So I don't know. Like I mean, I guess if somebody tells me they want to do like get revenge to prevent this from happening again, it's like I'm willing to listen. But what do you want to do? Like you have to give me something concrete. Like I don't understand like what you could potentially be advocating. But again, I don't see this becoming a problem. This idea that there's going to be like lots of assassinations of right-wing figures. I think that the left, who, again, as I was saying, they are much more prone to mental instability. And they're not all of them are insane. All of them are violent. Now, they themselves may not be violent, but they all like support it. Say, yes, we have to do violence because it's apocalyptic and existential for them. And again, I can't get too mad because I was the same way 6 years ago. And I know nothing could have changed. I mean, I wasn't actually going to pick up a gun, but I absolutely would have been supportive of someone who did. And there's nothing was going to change people like me. Nothing's going to change these people on the left. So yeah, what that means as they, get increasingly desperate, you're going to see some of them do crazy shit. There's nothing you can do. I mean, it's tragic, but I don't think that his death was in vain because there's always been a level of risk when you want to be a public figure, especially if you want to be maybe not by choice, but a divisive public figure. And, I mean, look, nobody likes turning the other cheek. I don't believe in it. I don't believe in it as a rule, but there's times where it's the right thing to do. And it's really effective. Like MLK's nonviolent approach to civil rights really was, very effective. But it cost. I mean, I'm sure that when he went into it, he knew it was going to cost him his life. And Charlie Kirk's message is going to spread more now in his death than it did in his life. So he's one of the few people who I feel like can leave this world feeling like, mission accomplished. Like, like he did what he was set out to do. And yeah, I mean, he made it like a huge personal sacrifice. But I don't think we need to do anything to win because I feel like, in a sense, we've already won this particular battle. So, talk about retaliation. Well, I don't know. I mean, I think that it takes care of itself. We just need that the more people understand just how sick and evil the left is, the more that helps us. Politically getting the policies that Charlie was pushing for in the first place, particularly the anti-immigration stuff. So that's the thing. I don't think we need to do anything. I mean, other than, you know, get this killer, you know, who's, again, he's got to be, I don't know, man. It's weird. Like, you know, like on one hand, I wanted to say like he's a liberal because they did find some like pro-trans stuff and things, and it seems more like something a liberal would do. But on the other hand, he kind of looks like a groyper. But then again, you know, you can have liberals. You would have said the same thing about the guy who tried to shoot Trump, right? And the thing is, honestly, I was thinking about it. If it was a groyper, he wouldn't have gotten away from the scene. Like that's a level of competence only somebody on the left would have. So I don't know. We'll have to wait to see more information. So scattered. That's all for now. See you in the next.